Good morning. Thanks for joining us on Friday, October the 31st, 2025. Well, all we've been talking about the last few days in the media is this whole video that was aired down in the States by the Premier Ford of Ontario, and that the trade talks have been halted. But while all this rambling was going on, and whose fault it is, should we have done it, who knew, who didn't know, who approved it, who didn't approve it, I picked up a few things regarding sacrifice that Prime Minister Carney has made it sort of a underlining theme for his budget that's coming up next week on November the 4th. He talked about sacrifice, and I think sacrifice is about maybe some changes that are going to have to occur in the public sector to save money and take those savings and reinvesting it into the economy to build and change the way we do business. But I think there's been a strategic change, or he's changed his approach on how he's going to deal with the negotiations with the United States as far as the trade agreement, or let's not call it a trade agreement. It's going to be a bunch of individual trade agreements that he's going to be able to hopefully achieve with the United States. Well, one thing that was glaring to me is that there seems to be this sacrifice of the auto industry. I hope that's not the case, but it almost seems like they've given up talking about it because the United States is not going to budge on the auto industry. The auto industry is going to the United States, and there isn't anything Canada is going to do to be able to stop it, at least at this time. Do I think there's going to be some kind of deal in the auto industry? I think I covered that in my last episode. I covered the whole termination of the trade talks on my last episode, so I'm not going to rehash that. So today I'm going to talk about the sacrifice of the auto sector for the sectoral strategy, or the sectoral sector, which is steel, aluminum, wood, copper, those important sectors that I think the government has identified as an area of focus to try to get some relief on those tariffs, because those tariffs are the ones that are hurting our economy and hurting our ability to sell steel and aluminum to other parts of the world. So let's get started and find out what's really going on with this. I got a couple articles here to lay the foundation to the argument that there may be a shift in strategy as how we're going to deal with the United States in regards to coming up with trade deals. Instead of having one global or complete package like the free trade agreement, it looks like we'll be making deals or trade deals on individual things like softwood, steel, farming, the auto industry, hopefully, and that kind of strategy. Because Prime Minister Carney did say that Canadians should expect to sacrifice in this upcoming budget that's coming up next week on November the 4th, which ironically is the same day the President of the United States and his administration will be at the Supreme Court with their lawyers over the case on whether the President of the United States has the authority to impose tariffs on other countries without the approval of the Congress. As Prime Minister Carney said, there's a transformational change occurring in the sectorial orientation of the economy, and there's a sharp debate, or at least I have some questions on whether the future of the auto industry is part of that restructuring by the Prime Minister and the Canadian government. I don't think it's something that they are opting for. It's just, I think they've sort of measured the situation against the United States and their negotiations with them, and realized that maybe we're not going to be able to fix things here or bring it back to the way it was. So let's take a bad situation and try to turn it into a positive. Let's focus on the things that we may have some leverage, and let's look at things that maybe are of interest to the United States, if we can trade positions and get to some kind of agreement. I think the auto industry has been put on the back burner because it's currently under the free trade agreement and it's protected under that free trade agreement right now. So they don't want that particular issue front and center while they're trying to get relief on the other sectorial uh, industries like steel and aluminum. From Prime Minister Carney is proposing a strategy boosting competitiveness and cutting reliance on the United States. If the government starts redirecting and supporting the sectoral approach to the strategic thinking overall, the auto industry could be faced with underinvestment, plant closures, and layoffs. That is the downside. It's very risky because if we don't get a deal somehow for the auto industry at the tail end of all of this, it will be transformed from making cars to creating parts and supplying them into the United States. There's some additional news articles, one from the Guardian, the other one from the Global News, but I want you to look at the date. I circled it, October 15th. Mark Carney says the automakers move to inject 13 billion into the United States is a direct consequence of Donald Trump's tariffs. On the Global News, Carney says Canadians must make sacrifices. He isn't yet saying on what, and that's correct. He hasn't let anybody know. We're going to know November the 4th. Now I want to give you just a sort of a brief outline of where the Canadian economy stands right now. Given that all these things that are occurring with the trade talks stopping, the auto industry is laying people off, stopping production. They're also bleeding money. So I just want to give you a general overview before I tell you what the type of risks that we're facing right now regarding sacrifice. The auto industry is not being talked about and has been put on what I believe is the back burner because we don't want to talk about something that we can't solve right now and is currently protected under the free trade agreement. Let's focus on the things that are hurting us badly, like softwood and the steel industry, aluminum industry. Canola is a different story because it's being impacted by the tariffs from China, and that's a totally different conversation for us to have. Canada's economy is showing signs of fatigue, and that's the reason why the Bank of Canada lowered its interest rate to 2.25%. A 0.4% contraction in the second quarter. We've talked about that in the past. Weak exports, stalling employment. We just got a Statistics Canada report on job vacancies, and they are down. So there isn't many vacancies out there for people to grab jobs. The Bank of Canada lowered its interest rate with the inflation rate being just below 2%. Prime Minister Carney says short-term sacrifices, and he keeps talking about this sacrifice thing. And I'm very interested to see what it's going to be. I think we're going to have a huge deficit. He may not come out and say it in the budget presentation, but I think there's going to be job losses, departments closed, and I think that they're thinking of shifting the money that they're saving on the operating side of the budget to the basically quote unquote capital side. And I've covered that before. South of the border, Mexico's output is expected growth nearly at 2% in the first half of 2025, which is shocking to me because I thought their economy was far weaker than ours. But analysts warn that the momentum will fade if they don't get a deal. However, I did say in the last episode that I believe that Mexico will get a trade deal with the United States before we do. There's a lot of reasons why, mostly because of their cooperation in the drug war that President Trump is very focused on. But they have Mexico, very high inflation, basically very low investment in their country. Security costs weigh heavily in Mexico, and that's going to have an impact in the second half of figures that come in to the end of this year, at the end of the fourth quarter. Bottom line is Canada is managing a soft landing, hopefully, while Mexico is enjoying a temporary export surge. Again, totally surprises me. But both nations face huge obstacles at the beginning, at least the first quarter of 2026, if not into the second quarter of 2026. Before I get to my final thoughts, and I know we're at the end of the episode here, I want to talk about some basically my outlook and risk. This is just my assessment of where I see things ending up at the end of the year. Growth in Canada is expected to be modest through to the end of 2025 based on all the numbers that were coming out. Unemployment, I've talked about that it's bad numbers. We don't like them. Job vacancies are very few. The bank sees risk from the trade conflict and weak demand. Although the Prime Minister and his administration are flying all over the world, getting letters of understanding for trade and getting some trade negotiations going, there doesn't seem to be a jump to the edge of the jumping board to start buying and shipping things to other countries other than the United States. It's a big hole to fill. The United States was our biggest trading partner. We exported 80% of our products down there, roughly, and that's going to take a long time to fill. Trade war with the United States remains a major downside risk to our country. And until we get some kind of relief or something resolved, that's going to stay there and carry over into 2026. Confidence in the economy, I wouldn't say it's down. Everybody's sort of on a wait and see attitude. It's basically going to hinge on if we're able to reach a deal with the United States and whether we can get our exports started out of our country to other countries. The other thing I want to talk about is obviously our main theme of our episode today, which is the sacrifice that Prime Minister Carney is talking about. There are sacrifices or changes that are going to occur, which his administration is going to identify sacrifices that, people are not going to be happy with. I don't know how those other parties like the Conservatives, the Bloc, the NDP will support the budget. Will there be an election? I just don't think they're crazy enough to call another election and defeat the government, though the Liberals keep tempting them in the House of Commons to bring down the government. I don't know why. Maybe they're just playing a game with them, but anything can happen, and they shouldn't think that it wouldn't happen. Will Canadians be happy with that? No. I think that's going to work against the Liberals. They're going to lose that NDP support that they had to get the minority government. Canadians are not going to be happy with the fact that we still don't have a trade deal. Prime Minister Carney hasn't really delivered on some of the most important things that he campaigned on that got him elected, that got some traditional Conservatives or NDPers or other parties vote for the Liberals because everybody felt he was the person that would be best suited to deal with the trade issue and the trade war. I don't think the Liberals are going to benefit in any way if there's an election. The entire country is not going to be happy with it, but it could happen. How is that going to affect him when he still has to deal with the President of the United States? Let me know your thoughts and comments on this. I'll be very interested to hear what you think of whether the Prime Minister has sacrificed the auto industry or basically put it aside in the back burner, realizing he can't reach any kind of agreement on the auto industry with the United States, and he doesn't want that affecting the other sectoral industries where they definitely need relief right away. A lot of the strategic support money for the industries that are suffering from the tariffs, that hasn't been distributed or delivered in its full capacity until that budget is approved. The budget is going to be discussed, I think, for a month and argued about. So don't be surprised. We're going to hear a lot about it. And thanks for watching. Be safe, and we'll see you on the next one.